Cannabis Common Sense, the show that tells the truth about marijuana and the politics behind its prohibition.
Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of Cannabis Common Sense. We have a great show for you tonight. I am joining you on the road in Guayaquil, Ecuador. I'm here for the Copa Cannabica La Perla, where I'll give a talk on the evolution of cannabis the first 25,000 years. But I have a great hip news segment for you tonight, one I could have only dreamed of when I first started this show almost 26 years ago. We'll get to that in a moment. Our tonight's guest is Polita Pepper in Mexico City. Polita has a nonprofit Cannativa political action committee that works all across Latin America to advance cannabis and hemp. We'll be talking to her about that. But first, stay tuned as we bring on our infamous dancing cannabis leaves.
I feel the force.
First story tonight's from Washington, D.C. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer of New York, along with Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey and Oregon's own Senator Ron Wyden, on Thursday introduced the Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act. The legislation repeals the federal cannabis prohibition of marijuana and defers to states' cannabis policies. It also tries to help repair the harms associated with the racially and economically disparate enforcement of cannabis prohibition. The official introduction of this bill to finally end the policy nightmare of federal marijuana prohibition is the culmination of unprecedented leadership in the Senate and engagement with stakeholders across the political spectrum. This is long overdue. The vast majority of Americans support comprehensive cannabis policy reform. The legislation removes marijuana from the Controlled Substances Act schedule entirely. That would end any threat of federal prosecution for possession and licensed activity. It will allow states to implement their own cannabis policies free from federal interference. It also eliminates many problems facing regulated state cannabis markets. These include the lack of access to financial services and the inability to deduct standard business expenses when filing federal taxes. The bill also directs funding to reinvest in communities disproportionately impacted by prohibition. It helps improve diversity and inclusion in regulated marijuana markets. State legal businesses could get checking accounts, credit cards, and other financial services now denied them. The bill would expunge federal cannabis convictions and encourage states to follow suit. It would require the FDA to set health, safety, and labeling standards and encourage research into the herb. The bill would also impose a federal excise tax of 5% to 12.5% for small businesses and 10 to 25% for large companies. It would direct the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration to address drug driving, requiring a standard for cannabis-impaired driving within 3 years. One of the bill's sponsors, Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey, along with Schumer and Finance Chair Wyden. Booker said, quote, as more states legalize cannabis and work toward reversing the many injustices the failed war on drugs levied against black, brown, and low-income people, the federal government continues to lag woefully behind. With strong restorative justice provisions for communities impacted by the drug war, support for small cannabis businesses, and expungement of federal cannabis offenses. This bill reflects long overdue common sense drug policy reform. End quote, Booker said. The federal law would still prevent using or selling marijuana in states that haven't legalized the herb. The Department of Justice would provide grants to help small law enforcement departments hire officers, investigators, and community outreach specialists to combat untaxed sales. Those harmed by the war on drugs would gain access to financing to enter marijuana businesses, and those who use cannabis would not face the loss of federal benefits such as housing or student loans. The bill limits cannabis testing for federal workers to employees in areas such as national security, law enforcement, and commercial transportation. The FDA and the Treasury Department's Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau would take over jurisdiction over marijuana from the Drug Enforcement Administration. These agencies would regulate it similarly to alcohol and tobacco. Legal cannabis businesses would be able to deduct their business expenses like other companies. Federal taxes would go toward aiding communities and individuals hit hardest by prohibition. This aid includes grants to community-based organizations to offer job training, and legal aid, mentoring, and literacy programs. Loans would be made directly to small businesses owned by socially and economically disadvantaged individuals and the lenders who make these loans. Federal research into the medical properties of marijuana would be increased. These include offering grants to develop research facilities and universities, especially minority-serving institutions and historically black colleges and universities. The bill was more than a year in the making as Democrats took control of the Senate. Schumer vowed to introduce legislation with hope it would attract the 60 votes needed for passage in the chamber. That would require at least 10 Republicans along with every Democrat. Many GOP senators now hail from states that have legalized marijuana for either medical or adult use. The introduction of comprehensive cannabis reform legislation in the Senate by none less than the majority leader himself is the strongest sign yet that cannabis prohibition in America is nearing its end. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said, quote, "A majority of Americans now support legalizing cannabis, and Congress must act by working to end decades over criminalization. It's time to end the federal prohibition on cannabis," end quote. The House, though, has twice passed legislation over the past 2 years to end the federal ban on marijuana and to help communities and individuals hardest hit by its prohibition. But until now, the Senate had not taken up those bills. In addition, the Senate never has taken any incremental steps such as the Secure and Fair Enforcement or SAFE Banking Act. The chamber even forced it out of unrelated bills House Democrats succeeded in adding it to. Senator Booker's objected to passing the SAFE Banking Act on its own. He said the moneyed interests pushing for that bill will lose their interest in also championing restorative justice issues once their money's protected. He's probably right. Across the United States, a number of states are moving toward legalization. Cannabis reform advocates in 4 states, Arkansas, Nebraska, Oklahoma, and North Dakota, have recently submitted signatures to election officials to place legalization proposals on the 2022 ballot, just 4 months away. Last Wednesday, representatives with the group Oklahomans for Sensible Marijuana Laws announced they had turned in over 164,000 signatures to Oklahoma's Secretary of State's office in an effort to place a binding statewide marijuana legalization initiative on the ballot. That totals well above the number of necessary signatures of 94,900 to qualify for the 2022 ballot. The proposed measure seeks to permit adults to legally possess and home cultivate personal use quantities of cannabis while also establishing a licensed retail marketplace. Those with past marijuana convictions or those who are currently incarcerated for certain cannabis-related crimes would be able to petition the courts for either record expungement or resentencing consideration. Last Friday, in Arkansas, the group Responsible Growth Arkansas submitted over 190,000 signatures to Arkansas Secretary of State to place the Arkansas Adult Use Cannabis Amendment on the November ballot. The constitutional amendment seeks to establish a state-licensed retail cannabis market for those aged 21 and older. It also seeks to expand the state's existing medical cannabis access program by increasing the total number of licensed dispensaries and by eliminating certain taxes. Advocates needed just over 89,000 valid signatures to qualify the measure for the ballot, so they turned in over 100% extra. Also last Friday, the group Nebraskans for Medical Marijuana turned in over 90,000 signatures each for a pair of medical cannabis legalization measures, just above the roughly 87,000 signatures necessary to qualify them for the November ballot. And finally, on Monday, representatives for the group New Approach North Dakota announced they had turned in 25,762 signatures to North Dakota's Secretary of State's office. That totals roughly 10,000 signatures above the number of signatures necessary of 15,582 to qualify for the 2022 ballot. The proposed measure permits adults to legally possess and home cultivate personal use quantities of cannabis while also establishing a licensed retail marketplace. Legalization measures in South Dakota and Maryland have already been confirmed for ballot placement in their respective states. In May, the group Legal Missouri 2022 turned in more than 385,000 signatures to Missouri officials, more than double the total necessary to place that constitutional amendment on Missouri's ballot. So, great news across the country. Our last story tonight is from Quebec City, Canada. Canadians who consume cannabis for purposes of self-medication most frequently report doing so to address pain, anxiety, sleep disturbances, and depression, according to data published in the Journal of Cannabis Research. Canadian researchers surveyed 489 subjects who purchased cannabis products at adult use retailers, but who acknowledged doing so to self-medicate. Consistent with prior data, the respondents were most likely to report cannabis products to mitigate anxiety, about 70%, improve sleep, 56%, and alleviate pain, about 53%, and to address feelings of depression, about 37%. Subjects were likely to acknowledge using cannabis to alleviate muscle spasticity, migraines, nausea, and symptoms of post-traumatic stress. Survey respondents typically reported using cannabis flower and selecting products dominant in THC. However, those respondents that exclusively defined their cannabis use as medical only expressed a preference for CBD dominant products. In contrast with other surveys, most respondents acknowledged reporting their cannabis use to their healthcare professionals. The results of other recent surveys published in the journal Complementary Therapies in Clinical Practice similarly determined that patients certified to use medical cannabis in the United States most commonly do so to treat the symptoms of pain, anxiety, post-traumatic stress, and depression. The results of yet another survey conducted by Harris Poll found that consumers most often report consuming cannabis to reduce stress and improve sleep and mitigate anxiety. Separate survey data compiled in April report that 21% of U.S. Medicare recipients acknowledge consuming cannabis for therapeutic purposes, typical to address symptoms associated with chronic pain, anxiety, and depression. The full text of the study, a description of self-medication with cannabis among adults with legal access to cannabis in Quebec, Canada, appears in the Journal of Cannabis Research. That's the end of our Hip News segment tonight. You know, I'm here in Guayaquil, Ecuador for the Polita Pepper. I just am recording this on the fly, as you can see, and appreciate you watching. Now we have our interview with Polita Pepper. But first, if you are a loved one, are looking for help finding a doctor who can get you a permit to legally possess, use, and grow cannabis, or possess more and grow more, then call us at 503-235-4606. That's 503-235-4606. Thanks for watching. Here's Polita Pepper with the international Latin American group Cannabis, and keep working and help us restore him. Good night. I would like to welcome back to the show our good friend Polita Pepper in Mexico City. Welcome back, Polita.
Thank you so much, Paul, to having me again at your show. I'm super happy to be here again. Hello to everybody.
You have been involved in so many different things all across Latin America, from Mexico to Argentina, with your group Cannabis. Do you want to first tell our audience about Cannabis and where it's based and its mission and yeah.
Yeah, well, Cannabis is now a social association which is focused mainly in education. We believe in education as a main key to social transformation. So we've been working last 8 years, mostly in Mexico, based in Mexico, giving people tools in order to develop their own tools, right, to move through the cultivations from cannabis, also extraction on all kinds of things related with cannabis work, because we believe that in the idea that if the society get involved in information and if we get well educated about cannabis issues, then we have the power of demand for ourselves better laws. In Mexico, you know, as many other places in Latin America, we don't have law or at least universal laws from cannabis, right? In Mexico, we have only the medicinal law, which is not actually a real democratic law. It's still being a privilege to get access to the medicinal cannabis in Mexico. So Canativa is mainly focused in education because we believe that it's through the education the key that we as a society can make real transformation through actions in our own countries, in our own societies, in our own persons. So it's education the key of social transformation, and that's what we've been doing the last 8 years. So Canativa is educational platform, and we are mainly based in Mexico, but we are happily working with collaboration through all Latin America, from Uruguay to, Colorado. I mean, also America. So that's very much what Canativa is and what we've been doing the last 8 years.
Yeah, that's what this TV show's about as well. It's about education, and education, as you say, I think is the key to changing attitudes. I know when I first started doing this show, we only had about 10% of Americans, or maybe 15% were in favor of legalization. Now we've got about 70%. And so it's education that cannabis is what it is, a safe alternative to alcohol, and a powerful medicine, and a powerful industrial application plant for building materials and paper and oil and plastic. But we are going to meet in Guayaquil, Ecuador, where you are organizing the speeches and the forum in Guayaquil. And then 3 weeks later, we're meeting in Cali, Colombia, where you and Canativa are organizing the forum and the speakers, and putting that out on the internet. And you've been doing that all across Latin America. I know you toured Argentina, which is about as far away as you can get in Latin America,
Yeah.
across the country. So what other events are you organizing?
Well, the idea of my idea and our dream in Canativa is to keep making collaboration with all kind of different events and platforms. And Cannabis Cup is also a chance to get information to people. Education, it's all around all kind of activities, right? So even Cannabis Cup, it's a party. It's a place where all the people in the cannabis community, we get together and celebrate our culture. It's also a chance to get people to know the different things that are happening through the region. We are also focusing in develop these collaborations with other Latin American countries because we believe in the power of the region that we have in the cannabis industry. I mean, if we start to think with that, the colonial thinking in our societies, we have a lot to think, and we talk about, we became of the ancestral cultures of this part of the world, and they know a lot of things they always knew about plants, not only cannabis. We are taking back the roots, and being radical means get back to the roots. So I think in order to get back to that roots, to get this ancestral knowledge of our cultures, our lands, yes, our countries, we start to develop a different way and a different perspective of the position that we have, and we have to empower the regional position in Latin America because we believe in that collaboration through the countries can get us all together in a better position in the cannabis industry, which is also capitalist, and which is also extractivist, and which is also colonialist. So the only way to build a different way to get the industry is to get involved in regional perspective, which is important to us. Talk about of our growers. Latin American growers are mainly indigenous communities. and field workers. So let's talk about the people who is like involved in the worst of the consequence of the prohibition. Well, let's talk about diversity and women, and let's talk about how bad still is being part of the cannabis world in the prohibition, and we are mostly in the prohibition in all the region. So we have to start to discuss if we are still waiting for a law that doesn't represent us, or if we are building different chances to get these all to make these all changes happen to our community. I mean, we have the power in our community. We don't need to still waiting, because there's nobody else than us cannabis people who knows our needs. So it's in our power to let other people know, to let our governments know what we need. They don't gonna tell us what we need, because our people, our community is the one that it's being involved, taking risks in their own bodies and lands, making cannabis happen around the world. So it's our community to have to speak loud, because we need uh, our world change, because we need dignity to our lives, because we are making this world with dignity, so we deserve it.
So Mexico has really led the way in terms of declaring cannabis is a natural human right. And your Supreme Court made that ruling several years ago. It seems like it was 4 years now. They were ordered, the Supreme Court of Mexico ordered the political system to regulate and legalize marijuana. But the laws that have been proposed have not been happily accepted by our community. They seem to be, as here in America, putting the big corporations in charge of the industry. Do you want to tell our audience how medical marijuana came about, and about the Supreme Court ruling there and the problems in implementing it? I know the House of Delegates passed one law 1 year that wasn't passed in the Senate, and the Senate passed a law a couple of years that wasn't accepted in the House of Delegates. So it's still in limbo, isn't it?
It's crazy. I mean, it's like it's crazy. It's really complex. Even if you are really keeping going with the situation in Mexico, it's kind of like hard to understand what is happening and why it's happening. Well, we start with in the medical law, just the medical law. In 2017, since 2017 we have the medicinal law. So medicinal law allowed to import, yes, products not manufactured in Mexico. We just have the right to import legal products to Mexico since 2017, right? But until the last year, 2021, we have the reglement, the rules, in order to keep this law going. So we have to wait from 2017 until 2021 to have the rules to make the law happen, right? And when we got the rules, we have only a super elitized access to the elaboration or cultivation or CBD, which is the only chance that medicinal law give us. So it's complicated, it's really expensive, and it's as complicated that there's no one company in Mexico growing legal medicinal cannabis. So that absurd is that law. As you said, it's a law. This is it will make thinking in mostly big corporation with are the one who can have the knowledge, not just the knowledge, but the know-how, and mostly the money to make this operation going. And that happens in Colombia also. We already see that happen. I imagine that happened also in America. So medicinal law in Mexico, it's made mostly for big corporation. Then after this law, we start like 5 years ago to discuss this thing that we call, which is not called recreational here, is something like a more like a adult use or something like that. So we,
I like the term.
sorry,
I don't like the term recreational. Recreation
neither.
is swimming and bicycling and basketball. You know, cannabis is a social use. That's what they say about alcohol as well.
Yeah.
They don't say recreational drinking. That's binge drinking, right?
Yeah.
So it's a
That's correct.
pejorative term, a term that makes it look bad.
Yeah, I agree. Well, so since like I think I don't know if 5 or 6 or 7 years ago we've been discussing this because there was a group of really brilliant people who developed this legal strategy to demand to the Mexican state the right of the free libre personalidad, which is something like the free personality.
Human
Sorry?
rights. Yeah, to develop your
Develop your
personality.
personality. And this is like focusing cannabis in this legal strategy, but you can like use the same strategy to everything because we have the legal right to develop our own personality, right? So these brilliant people like 5 or 6 years ago developed this legal strategy to demand the state recognize our legal right, which is supposedly guaranteed in our constitution, and they win for 5 times in a row in the court. So the court say, yes, you actually guys can have the right to your own, develop your own personality. What happened next? So our representatives, legal representatives like the senators and deputies, they have to start to develop a law, and they start. And what happened? So they went to the senators, to the deputies, and then came back to the senators. And the last step to make the law happen is senators to the president. And then the president read the law and say it's okay. And if the president say it's okay, it's a law, then it happens. What happens with the recreational or adult use of cannabis in Mexico was like there wasn't anything happen after the senators have the law. They have to say that they have to ask for more time if they don't have the law ready, or they have to pass through the president. And what happened? Nothing. They
The
say nothing.
president bill opposes this, right? Even though he's more of not as much of a capitalist as many Mexican presidents. He's considered the left by American pundits, but he's still not in favor of this change in adult use cannabis laws.
Yeah, what we realize mostly is that like a president, like this government particularly, doesn't have any um, desire, or they don't want cannabis to be legal. So what happened then is that we don't have any legal precedent of what we have to do as a society to demand our government make the law happen, because they have to do it and they just didn't do it. So Supreme Court again have to listen to because at the beginning of that, when that happened, the Supreme Court doesn't say anything also. So it was just in order to listen the pressure of the demand of us, the society, right, that they have to pronounce something because they already recognize our right, and then we don't have law. So the Supreme Court came again to the public and said, okay, I'm not in charge to make a law because it's not my work, but what we can do is declare that the prohibition of marijuana is not more constitutional. So they put like the brand, like they put the basis to the not to make this, right? Like
Yeah.
they
Did
say,
they,
no,
did
yeah,
they strike down all the marijuana laws in Mexico? So the laws against marijuana are no longer in place. Is that correct?
is that correct? But what happened in reality? We need also rules to make that declaration of the Supreme Court be like effective. So we know that now in Mexico, the prohibition of marijuana is not constitutional, but we don't have any rules, any kind of like parameters of any kind that make this effective in the streets, in the work fields for the people. So if you are like smoking or transporting marijuana, you go to a court to see what is happening to you, and it's in the hands of the judge to decide what happened. So we are not we still have no guarantee, and the institution that supposedly be in charge and develop this reglement to make that happen is not answering. It's not like it's making the bureaucratic process even more slow. It's already slow, but they are making everything more slow because anybody want to like keep the steps forward to make this happen. So we are in a kind of really complex political limbo, but the reality for Mexico is that we don't have any warranty yet.
Is there any movement, any path forward that you think might happen now? What do you think is going to happen from this point? Can you guess or have a vision?
I can tell you what I see that it's already happening without law. It's like everything it's happening in Mexico without law because Mexico you can every 6 months to a cannabis cup. We have dispensaries, we have seed banks, we have shows happening. We have like the complete scene of what should be Mexican industry happening. The only thing what we don't have it's legal guarantee that we are safe doing what we already been done from years and years. So Mexican society is making things happen. Mexican community people is doing everything, and we have to move and we are working and developing the way to regulate our practices between us, between the community, because the state is not doing anything. I don't, and the Mexican institutions are doing anything. They are not responding our demands. Even we are keep doing the social movement, the political movement to pressure through the activism, to the go and knock the doors to the authorities. They are like just pretending that are working, but they are don't. And you know what is happened, which is also complex. We are in the last years of this president, and we are about to start, all the new campaigns for the new president. And there is really complex because cannabis is not a main issue in the agenda. They don't have it as a priority. So my guess is at least the next 2 years, which is like the end of this presidential period and the beginning of the next one, there is not happening anything about the Mexican recreational or adult use cannabis law because it's not in their agenda. It's not their priority. It's our priority. So the chance that we have is keep making our movement and political and social movements stronger and start to develop more effective strategies in order to get our community regulated with good practices, quality, ethic between us, because we cannot still wait it. They are not doing it. And yes, for the next 2 years or 3 years at least, nothing different will happen without our own organization.
So are any of the candidates that are probably running for president, are there any spokespeople in the political establishment that talk about legalization at all, or talk about the possibility of the industry developing in Mexico for medical and recreational or adult use and industrial? Are any candidates getting behind that?
Well, I guess we will know in the next months because they are already discussing between their own parties to know who is the one who go to run for the president. And I think they will talk about it because it's important when we are discussing, and then it's important from them in order to make their promotions. But I don't know if they really have some intention because when you go as an activist, with the politicians and deputies and senators, you see a lot of like willing to they declare in favor to legalize cannabis, right? But then they have so many discussion between them and their own parties that at the end no one it's like giving the face for the legalization of marijuana until now.
So that's the situation in Mexico. You know, we're going to meet twice in the coming month, first in Ecuador and then in Cali, Colombia. What is the situation in the rest of Latin America? Can you go through various countries and talk about what the cannabis laws are?
Well, first law in the world actually was a Uruguay law that they have like I think already 9 years
Yeah,
for the law. And we can see as Uruguay as an example that the law is just the first step. They don't have a lot of warranties. There is a bunch of things that doesn't work in their law, and you will talk about that with Juan Navas in your next show. Then we have Colombia, 2016, that they declare marijuana legal, and we will see like 5 or 6 years later that they don't have like enough, warranties. The law doesn't recognize in a proper way their own indigenous communities. They don't have actually running products in the market. The
there's not a
business.
store you can
Yeah,
go into and buy Medellin buds or Cali colas. There's none of that's commercially available, but there are some big companies from
they are
mainly from Canada that have stepped
Canada.
forward.
Yeah,
And as you probably recall, my partner Bill here and I were both targeted by Canadian companies that took us out really back in 2016 economically, and just using forgeries and buying the judges here in America, they were able to completely rob us of our business and take us out of our ability to change the laws and to put initiatives on the ballot. But I think that was the point altogether. And so these same cannabis companies, the one that attacked us, it's currently the board of directors of the group called the Kronos Group, which has the backing of Altria, the owners of Marlboro Tobacco. So they're Kronos and Marlboro Tobacco are hand in hand. Marlboro invested almost $2 billion in
crazy.
Kronos. Yeah, and they say, but it's the same group of people at Kronos that came in and promised me they would help with our initiative to legalize marijuana, but instead forged our signature on documents and stole our business, really. So I've been targeted by these same people, but they are working with a lot of businesses in Colombia. You'll see, I think we will see some big greenhouses when we go
Yeah,
to Cali. And
hopefully.
yeah, and I see photos of them, but they're mainly exporting, right? They're not selling to a domestic market. They're selling to
Yeah,
Canada and Europe.
yeah, we will see that more close like next month. But what it seems to me, well, Argentina is also like a huge movement now. We will have to wait a little bit to see what is happening about all the regulation that will like now out. Then it's Ecuador that already have a law, but we don't know actually who actually can grow, and if it's like how is medicinal access is going. And we have to that nothing is happened like it's Bolivia, which is really important to have a regulation there, or Paraguay, which is also a productor, but they have the Paraguayan government have the right to produce hemp. So it's really complex, the regional situation. But what it seems to me is more like the cannabis industry and also cannabis legalization is not the paradise that we as an activist romanticize. Right? They have a lot of complexity. They have like a lot of political and economical interests, which big, really big corporation. There are a bunch of interns, a bunch of money through this movement also. And what it seems is like a legalization of cannabis is not that paradise for the people of cannabis community. So we have to keep fighting. We actually need a law, but law is the first step to keep like doing our work um, valid for us, not for the big companies, not for the one or two political interests, right? It's mainly we have to keep fighting, and because you've been doing this for the last 20 years, and there's not enough. 40.
40.
Come on.
Yeah. 45 actually. Since 1978.
Yeah.
So
And there's not
I was
enough.
never in the closet. Yeah, since I went to my first marijuana legalization rally in Washington D.C. It's called the White House Smoke-In in 1978, and then in 1982, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws named me as the Washington State Director of NORML in Washington State, where Seattle is. I live there. I moved to Oregon in '84 to work on the second vote in the United States. But we'll talk more about that when we're in Colombia and stuff. So there's really a slow development here. And, the people who made this illegal to start with, it was all about money and power. And they claimed that marijuana caused people to go crazy and kill their family and friends. Well, as we know, nothing could be farther from the truth. Marijuana calms people down and makes them less likely to commit violent acts. But it was the petrochemical, pharmaceutical, military, industrial, transnational, corporate, elite, fascist sons of bitches who gave us the lies about marijuana. And those lies seem to be continuing today. I think, cannabis makes you question reality and explore reality. And the masters of our economy and our political systems, our political economy, don't want us to think. They want us to just be cogs in their wheel. They want us to just work for them and be quiet, and so we've got to expand our rights right now, because the development of artificial intelligence really endangers the liberty of all future generations. We see it happening here in America, and even more strongly in China, where they're using mass surveillance and artificial intelligence to stifle any sort of pro-individualism. They want us to just be part of the mass. And so we've got to fight that. And I appreciate that you're doing that with your education. I had a good time working with Canativa when I came there back in I think it was 2018, maybe it was 2019, to Puerto Verda.
Yeah, I remember that. It was a super beautiful show. And that moment, our main audience was like desperate families. You remember there was like, 300 of desperate moms asking you any kind of questions.
Yeah, and how to help those patients. I've had a lot of experience helping patients, and so it's a blessing to be able to help those people that so desperately need this help. But it's a shame that we have to fight this stigma and these lies about cannabis, when cannabis is such a beneficial plant. And I think it's a good thing to question authority. And, cannabis tends to make us think about those control that we have. And, So in terms of Canativa, do you have other conferences planned outside of uh, the ones we're going to in the next month in Cali and Guayaquil, Ecuador, and Colombia?
Well, I'm super excited, Paul, to tell you that this year, like most like the next months in Latin America is like full of cannabis events because it's the Mila Jansen tour, the Dabadu Latin American tour. So we will have Dabadu in Mexico, in Uruguay, in Colombia. I think in Brazil also. I think in
Peru.
Peru also. Yeah, so it's happening, and that just show us, I mean, how our region, it's made the things happen without any law. We are already making things happen. So there's a bunch of cops like every weekend, and some parts some country in Latin America, there's like some show happening, and it's a super exciting movement, and it's keep going. So I think that we have to uh, put our fight in our bed in our community. We have to keep doing it. We have to keep fighting for the legal right to do it, because we need that guarantee. But we are already doing it, and as much as we assume that daily action to make the community for us, and make like day by day, keep building a better place for us. We don't have to wait anybody else. Even we need that legal warranty, right?
Yeah, we do. We do. I know you were talking about an event in Costa Rica that might happen
Yeah,
sometime.
yeah, the Latin American Cup. Yeah, we still working and make that happen this year, but we are not sure because there's so many other events happening that we have to, like, talk with everybody in order to be part, that make them part of the Latin American Cup. Latin American Cup is the idea of as a, it's a show, it's a party, it's a cannabis cup, but it's also our bet in make something different that we can build from the different regions. I mean, we are inviting of the main or the first of the most popular cannabis cup in all the region, and we wanna have you all guys together in it, develop, talk about quality, talking about which parameters we have to use in order to see the samples, building methodologies that are building at the very same time the quality of the control of quality of our region. So we have to make it happen with all of the regional community. So we are waiting, hopefully this year. If it's not this year, for sure it will come the next year. But we are waiting us, all of you guys, the pioneers in the region, to have in the same table, talking about not just the flowers we are analyzing and tasting, talking about how can we build methods and parameters and quality, and interchanges with our region, talking about cannabis.
I think we have to expand our rights beyond just the right to free speech, to include the right to privacy, the right to consciousness, and to develop our personality, like the Mexican Supreme Court has pioneered. I have a friend from here in Oregon who moved to Belize many years ago, and he was asking me just, when are we going to organize an event in Belize? Have you heard about anything around Belize? I know Belize is one of the few countries in Central America. They speak English, which
Yeah.
is something that's good for me since I don't speak Spanish. My Chinese doesn't come in very handy in Latin America. But I still do speak some Chinese, even though I went to school in China and imported hemp paper and hemp fat. But
Awesome.
future with Belize?
Well, Belize, what I've been reading and been like knowing around people who is actually working with the Belizean government, and that they are already working in the law of Belize. So I think maybe this year or the next year we will know about this happening, and for sure wanna go there because it's a beautiful country to make it something happen, to know how they are planning to do it, because it's a really interesting thing. What I heard, it's the people here who is working with them, is that they are thinking also in something about recreational and tourist access to the in Belize. And I think it's a really good chance that we are not talking seriously. I mean, like, not hypocrite about like how can tourism and cannabis can make better economies and resources for some kind of places, right? So I think they are also discussing that, which is really interesting, and I really want to hear what they are planning. But we will hear, I think, pretty soon, because as far as I know, they are already working on it.
I see. Maybe when we're together later this week in Ecuador, we can talk about my friend and his reaching out from Belize. But there's other countries in Central America, unlike Costa Rica or Belize, that are the exact opposite. And I know El Salvador is one. I had a friend who was arrested at the airport in El Salvador, and I went there and visited him in prison and had a press conference. But El Salvador, just a small amount of cannabis, like 5 grams, I think, can land you in prison for 20 years. And the condition of those prisons is horrific. They're run basically by gangs.
Yeah.
And so, is there any movement that you know of in Brazil or other countries in South America that you can talk about that are
Yeah,
legalizing?
yeah. Well, Central America as a region, they have a strong political movement about against prohibition, not just cannabis. They are mainly focused on all kind of substance classified as drugs. They've become a political movement that is making things happen because they are using the really brilliant argument to the migration and also the violence involved in all the gunsing in Central America, right? So they are working in the use. I think they call it use and abuse of some substance. They are like fighting, right? Not just for cannabis. They are fighting for the legal right to keep access to people and fight against violence. And Brazil is happening right now. Paul. They actually have the medicinal law. They can actually Nico, co-founder of Canativa, my partner, is working and starting Canativa there. They have the legal right to cultivate for the patient association. It's a thing that we don't even have here in Mexico. So I think they just have medicinal law though. We have to keep an eye on Brazil because there's a bunch of things happening. And with Brazil happens a very particular situation that is the only Latin American country, well, not just the only, but the biggest one who doesn't speak Spanish. So it's like a kind of a different world because it's also Brazil. It's also continental. It's a continent. I mean,
Yeah. It's the
country.
biggest country in Latin America in terms of geography, where Mexico is the biggest in terms of population.
Yeah,
Brazil is bigger geographically. It's the fourth largest country or the fifth largest country in the world. That's right. And
yeah.
so it's huge.
So it's continent. I mean, it's a bunch of things really interesting. It's happening the last weekend. They just have the fair gathering of the Medicinal Association of Patients. And this weekend, just they are having a reunion, a gathering in some with some indigenous people there who are also working not in the cannabis, in the legal and the legal right to ancestral medicine. So they are talking not just in cannabis, they are just talking in DMT, for example, and other substance, right? So also really interesting things are happening. I know that a lot of different countries through Latin America are working hard. We are all working hard in making this happening. But also they are also have to fight in working that this movement keep happening to us, because as you all know better than anybody else, big corporations also are starting to see where to put their own seeds. So we have to keep fighting for our seeds to grow.
Yeah, yeah. So in terms of Canativa, if our audience wants to find out more about Canativa and your work, where should they look?
Yeah, please find more about Canativa. We are our website is www.canativa.net. We have also Canativa social media as Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And most of our time we are working building information which is free. So information in our platforms is free. It's for using, and it's for like sharing with everybody else, right? So that's our main focus as far as we can see until now. It's that if you put the seed in somebody and somebody put the seed in somebody else, it's the only way to keep our community informed, empowered, and growing. So education is for that. In Canativa, our main focus is like uh, share this powerful tool to in order to emancipate ourselves. Cannabis information, cannabis education, it's a tool to emancipation, and that's revolutionary.
That's true. That's true. Well, I really appreciate your great work out there. And we've been talking with Polita Pepper in Mexico City, the founder and director of Canativa. You're working all over Latin America. I really admire that. And we're going to see each other just in a few days
Just in a
in Guayaquil, Ecuador, for the Copa La Perla Cannabica, I think. And so is there anything you want to say in closing?
Yeah, I want to say thank you, Paul Stanford, for having me again in your show. Thank you for all the people that make this happen. Thank you for all your work and all the people that is behind you and your side, and for the seed that you put in the earth, that we all of us learn about you and all our like work masters in the fight, in the activism, in the cannabis. Um, we've been working because we are inspired in all of you guys' work. So thank you for put the seed in and keep making it flower. So thank you, Paul Stanford. I'm really happy that I will see you in a couple of days in Ecuador.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you, and you're very welcome. Wild horses couldn't drag me away. A few have tried, but I'm still at it. So I appreciate our common goal to free cannabis and free people and free our minds and ourselves
Yeah.
and our bodies. Well,
Thank you.
thanks, and keep working to restore hemp. Good night.